Hello everyone, I'm going to show you my turbulence node today. This node is made to create effects like heat distortion or deforming surfaces based on other images. So by default we get an animation already, and the way it works is there's a noise that is built in the node and the noise is driving the distortion. Normally you could create this with an iDistort node. I can't find it right now. But the iDistort node gives you the problem that it distorts in one direction. So this is still here. So if you go to directional, you see that effect that the whole image is moving in one direction. Therefore, I built this uniform setup so the distortion stays in place and goes uniformly in all directions. Yeah, you can, of course, modify the amount, and with the noise you can modify scale and all these kind of effects and detail however you like. Then with the detail you get this glass strength effect. The glass strength is basically producing negative and positive values to drive the distortion in all directions uniformly, and with the glass strength you can just modify the effect slightly. You can also display the noise to see what you're doing, modify it here, and then you have additional options. For example, you have the displacement blur. So if you enable it, you see some parts of the image get blurred and others don't. The displaced blur uses an own noise, yeah? So it's not using this noise, it has its own. So we can display it here. And here you get basically the same settings that you know already from the turbulence. So we get animation, we can modify the animation speed, and we can also modify the amount, of course, of the blur. And the very cool thing is here, you're not stuck with the noise. You can use external textures to drive that whole thing. For example, let's disable the blur for a moment. And let's use the displacement map input and input it into a glass texture. And as soon as you plug it in, this noise will not longer be used. Yeah? So the texture will be applied automatically. And now you see we get deformation based on the water drops. We could do the same for the displacement blur with a blur map input. And now we get some very cool effects like frost on glass or so. And lastly, we have, of course, a mask input, which you can connect, and it will just mask stuff. The node works with overscan already, so when I scale down everything now, you will see the effect ends there. So it works just fine. One thing to know about the mask, though, is that it doesn't just control, like the mask options here, the mix doesn't just control the opacity of the effect, it also controls the strength. So if you go down, you see that the effect slightly stops, which is very cool, because if you blur the mask, you get a smooth transition from effect to no effect, which is very nice. Also, I forgot to mention this, I'm sorry. If you use the displacement map here, and you don't like the transitions between the blurred and the non-deformed areas, let's disable the blur. If you don't like the transition, you can go to the edge bleeding thing here. And the edge bleeding is basically a blur of the texture that smooths out this transition. So as you increase this, you will see it slightly repairs the transition between these areas. And that's it. I hope you find the node useful. Give me any feedback if you find any problems, and have a nice day.